I like the walrus best, said Alice, because you see, when he was little, he was a little sorry for the poor oysters. He ate more than the carpenter, though, said Tweedledee. You see, he held his handkerchief in front so that the carpenter couldn't count how many he took, contrary-wise. That was mean, said Alice indignantly. Then I liked the carpenter best if he didn't eat so many as the walrus. But he ate as many as he could get, said Tweedledum. This was a puzzler. After a pause, Alice began. Well, they were both very unpleasant characters. Here she checked herself in some alarm at hearing something that sounded to her like the puffing of a large steam engine in the wood near them, though she feared it was more likely to be a wild beast. Are there any lions or tigers about here? She asked timidly. It's only the Red King snoring, said Tweedledee. Come and look at him, the brothers cried, and they each took one of Alice's hands and led her up to where the king was sleeping. Isn't he a lovely sight? Said Tweedledum. Alice couldn't say honestly that he was. He had a tall red nightcap on, with a tassel, and he was lying crumpled up in a sort of an untidy heap, and snoring loudly, fit to snore his head off, as Tweedledum remarked. I'm afraid he'll catch cold with lying on the damp grass, said Alice, who was a very thoughtful little girl. He's dreaming now, said Tweedledee, and what do you think he's dreaming about? Alice said, nobody can guess that. Why, about you, Tweedledee exclaimed, clapping his hands triumphantly. And if he left off dreaming about you, where do you suppose he'd be? Where I am now, of course, said Alice. Not you, Tweedledee retorted contemptuously. You'd be nowhere. Why, you're only a sort of thing in his dream. If that there king was to wake, added Tweedledum, you'd go out, bang, just like a candle. I shouldn't, Alice exclaimed indignantly. Besides, if I'm only a sort of thing in his dream, what are you, I should like to know? Ditto, said Tweedledum. Ditto, ditto, cried Tweedledee. He shouted this so loud that Alice couldn't stop saying, Hush! You'll be waking him, I'm afraid, if you make so much noise. Well, it's no use your talking about waking him, said Tweedledum, when you're only one of the things in his dream. You know very well you're not real. I am real, and Alice began to cry. You won't make yourself a bit realer by crying, Tweedledee remarked. There's nothing to cry about. If I wasn't real, Alice said, half laughing through her tears, it all seems so ridiculous. I shouldn't be able to cry. I hope you don't suppose those are real tears, Tweedledum interrupted in a tone of great contempt. I know they're talking nonsense, Alice thought to herself, and it's foolish to cry about it. So she brushed away her tears and went on as cheerfully as she could. At any rate, I'd better be getting out of the wood, for really, it's coming on very dark. Do you think it's going to rain? Tweedledum spread a large umbrella over himself and his brother and looked up into it. No, I don't think it is, he said, at least not under here, nohow. But it may rain outside. It may, if it chooses, said Tweedledee. We've no objection contrariwise. Selfish things, thought Alice, and she was just going to say good night and leave them, when Tweedledum sprang out from under the umbrella and seized her by the wrist. Do you see that? He said in a voice choking with passion, and his eyes grew large and yellow, all in a moment, as he pointed with a trembling finger at the small white thing lying under the tree. It's only a rattle, Alice said, after a careful examination of the little white thing. Not a rattlesnake, you know, she said hastily. She added hastily, thinking that he was frightened. Only an old rattle, quite old and broken. I knew it was, cried Tweedledum, beginning to stamp about wildly and tear his hair. It's spoilt, of course. Here he looked at Tweedledee, who immediately sat down on the ground and tried to hide himself under the umbrella. Alice laid her hand upon his arm and said in a soothing tone, You needn't be so angry about an old rattle. But it isn't old, Tweedledum cried in a greater fury than ever. It's new, I tell you. I bought it yesterday. My nice new rattle! And his voice rose to a perfect scream. He's kind of acting like a baby. But he's supposed to be grown, but he's acting like a baby. That might be some interesting stuff to draw. I think in this chapter there's a lot of good things to draw. Tweedledee and Tweedledum would be great. This rattle, this would be kind of good to draw too. I mean, you could decorate it however you wanted. All this time, Tweedledee was trying his best to fold up the umbrella with himself in it, which was such an extraordinary thing to do that it quite took off Alice's attention from the angry brother. But he couldn't quite succeed, and it ended in his rolling over, bundled up in the umbrella, with only his head out, and there he lay, opening and shutting his mouth and large eyes, looking more like a fish than anything else, Alice thought. Another interesting image. Of course, you agree to have a battle, Tweedledum said in a calmer tone. Funny thing to do, invite somebody to a battle. I suppose so, the other sulkily replied as he crawled out of the umbrella. Only she must help us to dress up, you know. So the two brothers went off, hand in hand, into the wood, and returned in a minute, with their arms full of things such as bolsters, blankets, hearthrugs, tablecloths, dish covers, and coal scuttles. I don't know what a coal scuttle is, and I don't know what a bolster is without some context, so those are things I would write down in my notebook. Coal scuttle and bolster. Coal scuttle and bolster. So those are words I would want to look up. I don't have to look them up just this moment because I don't know that they're relevant to my understanding the story. But remember, when you come across words you don't know or you're not sure of, just write them down. I would guess something around the house because that's what the rest of the items are. Rug, tablecloth, dish cover, blanket. I hope you're a good hand at pinning and tying strings, Tweedledum remarked. Every one of these things has